Hello, today we are going to install a Microsoft Active Directory domain. For that, we are going to create a Windows Server virtual machine. So this is the Windows Server, an operating system from Microsoft, a server offering. So for DNS server, Active Directory server, DHCP server, etc. The current version is 2022. And this is a minor upgrade to version 2019. It says in here, so server 2022 is also a minor upgrade over its predecessor, which is server 2019. Okay, so let's get a installer ISO. For that, I search on Google Windows Server 2022 ISO, takes me to Evaluation Center. You need to download the ISO, which is this thing. Okay, it asks you to register for a free trial today. I already have the ISO installer. So let's create a virtual machine. For that, I am on Linux Kubuntu 22.10. We're going to use Virtual Machine Manager. Okay. Let's see if we can clean up some things from here. This thing. Okay. Do I want to also delete the QCOW, which is the hard disk, virtual hard disk? Yes. Okay, let's go new. I'm going to use an ISO. Next. Let's select the ISO, which is this thing. NUS Windows Server 2022, updated February 2023, x86 DVD. I use this ISO. It selects the operating system. Could be. Let's go with this one. Microsoft Windows Server 2022. Okay, forward. I'm going to give it, I know, 6 vCPUs, and then I'm going to, after the install is done, I'm going to give it just, I know, 2 CPUs. And for RAM, it says that the minimum required is 4 gigabytes, which is, I don't know what. $4096 plus some video memory, like so. Forward, we'll create a disk image. So it says that you might get away with 40 gigabytes. Let's make this 100 just in case. Gigabytes. Forward. What's the name of the virtual machine? Let's make it like this. We'll need to prepare a list of settings. So the list of settings should look like this. We need a static IP address. We need a computer name and a domain name, DNS domain name for the domain, and NetBIOS name for the domain. Okay, let's see what do people use. Seems okay. So let's go with that. AD Active Directory domain name. DNS domain name. Local dom.local. NetBIOS name. Local dom with uppercase. Okay, and what's the name of this computer? No, a classic one is DC1. Okay, Windows 2000 2022 and DC1. Customize configuration before install. Network selection, the default one. Finish. Says that the default virtual network is not started. It's going to start it. Let's look at the configurations for the virtual machine. Correct machine name. KVM, x86-64, the best motherboard, BIOS. Yes, the CPUs are always wrong. 1 and this is 6. Memory, okay. Boots from the disk. Let's try to not use SATA, but use something better, which is VirtIO. The CD-ROM can remain SATA. NIC could be VirtIO. The rest are always defaults. And in order to boot, we'll need the Windows ISO for Virt Manager Tools. Okay, so let's find that thing. Okay, so we need Virt ISO latest. This thing. This is the one. Parent directory, latest VirtIO, and either this or this. I guess this is a symlink to this because they have the same size, 500 megabytes. Okay, I have already downloaded the ISO, so I'll need to also make it available as a DVD-ROM during the installation. So I go add hardware, we need storage, we need a CD-ROM, SATA is okay. Let's make this thing bigger. Manage. We'll need VirtIO Win 01229 from January 2023. Choose. Okay, and this is it. What about the boot order? So CD-ROM 2 is VirtIO drivers. CD-ROM 1 is the Windows Server installer ISO. Boot options is going to boot from CD-ROM 1. Okay, so we can go begin installation. It creates the hard disk, the virtual hard disk. Now it boots from the first CD-ROM. Okay, it says English. Okay, install. Next, it says activate Microsoft Server. What if I don't have a product key? Okay. 2022 standard x64. So there's only one architecture, which is AMD 64. There's no 32-bit. And before I press next, it says description recommended. This option omits most of the Windows graphical environment managed with a command prompt, PowerShell, or with the HTTPS web UI, which is Windows Admin Center. So no, I don't want that. I want a full graphical user interface. Okay. Next. I accept the Microsoft license terms. Next, I want to install, and in here I need to specify the VirtIO drivers. Okay, so it says that it doesn't find any hard disk because the hard disk is not SATA, is VirtIO, so load driver. Browse the VirtIO CD-ROM. Always forget what to select in here. Okay, so it says select the driver to install Red Hat VirtIO as CSI controller. I go next. Okay, it has found the hard disk. Says 100 gigabyte, correct. I select it. I go next. So it has formatted the hard disk, created, I don't know, 2 partitions, and then it copies files and installs them. So we'll pause a second and wait for the installer to get further. Okay, it says restarting. Let's restart now. Okay, so it has installed the operating system. It's going to start, create files for my user. It didn't ask for the user account yet. Okay, we'll be back in a second. Okay, so it says that there is a built-in user, which is a local Windows user named administrator with an uppercase A. And I need to type a password. Okay, let's go finish. The password does not meet the password complexity requirements. Okay. Finish. Press Ctrl-Alt-Delete to unlock. So send key, Ctrl-Alt-Delete. Administrator. It has created my user. And it doesn't see the network because it doesn't have drivers for my network interface card. So let's fix all of those things. First of all, let me terraform a bit the Windows UI. No task view, no search, lock the taskbar. Okay, let's do first of all the network interface card. Red Hat VirtIO Ethernet adapter. Do we want to allow PCs to be discoverable? I don't know. Close. What are these things? QEMU USB tablet. MSRT. This is an actual antivirus engine that's going to run and make sure I do not have viruses here, which is a problem for me. So let's go to the group policy. So these are local group policies. Microsoft Defender antivirus. Turn off. Configure the turn off to be enabled. Okay. And Windows Update. Configure automatic updates to be disabled. Okay. What else? Browse my computer. Okay, so all of the hardware on this virtual machine is known to Windows. Next, we're going to prepare a fixed IPv4 address, so not DHCP. So it says that this is the IP address that's reserved for this virtual machine. What can we use here? I don't know, let's go with 200. It's available. Okay, so let's set the computer name. So the computer name is DC1. Okay, let's enable remote RDP server. I don't need any firewall, so let's get rid of those. turn off all three profiles. Turn off the firewall in all of the three profiles. Domain, private, public. Okay. The user administrator is already added and all members of administrators user group is already added. Okay. We can restart now, but then we'll need to set the IP address. Okay, Control Alt Delete. So let's do the IP address. We don't want TCP IP version 6. And IPv4 should not be DHCP. So 192.168.122.200 and the default submask, which is this one, and the default gateway, I guess. Who knows? So yes, .1 is the default gateway, and the subnet mask is .0. Okay, and what about DNS servers? DNS server should be itself. But then that will break connectivity. Okay, let's try that. 127.0.0.1. Okay. Okay. Let's see if we can connect using RDP. X3 RDP. Okay, we need something like this. Okay, 1080p. This thing. Okay, and we'll need to leave some room for the KD plasma panel. So 1080p could be the height. Okay, width, let's make this 10, like this. Okay, so height 80, 1020 width. The IP address is this thing. Okay, and then we want speed slash video. What else? No sound. No smart sizing. I'm not sure if it works. Effects. And 2 more settings. Network speed. And the last one, bits per. Let's go GFX. BPP. 32 like this. Ctrl Shift V. Do I trust this machine? Yes, it's mine. Password. Okay, so it has logged out the administrator Windows local user from the hardware terminal, which is the virtual machine, virtualization software, and has connected the same session via Windows session via RDP to the RDP client. So the RDP client is too tall. We need to make it 50 pixels smaller. Ctrl C. Height. Let's see if this is enough. Okay, let's try to use this. Let's mark the fact that the computer has itself as the DNS server. Okay. And what else? Okay. So now we need to follow a tutorial. Let's see which one we choose. So we need to do two things. Enable Active Directory domain controller. So turn the machine into an Active Directory domain controller. And then enable a DNS server on this machine. Okay. Let's look at the settings again. Internet networking settings. So it ends with 200, the IPv4 address, which is what we want. DNS server itself. Okay, so this means we cannot ping anything. Okay, because it's not a DNS server yet. Okay, don't show this message again. So it says, the tutorial says that we should go to Server Manager, which is this application. Then we should go Manage Add Roles and Features. Okay. Next. Always role-based, never remote desktop services installation. Select the server from the pool. It's always this default value, never a virtual hard disk. Okay. Then it says server roles, Active Directory domain services. So this thing. Okay, and then add features. So I selected the wrong thing. Let's start from scratch. Manage, add roles and features, next, next, and Active Directory domain services. Okay, include management tools, so the default, add features. It's the server roles, so next. It's the features, next. Active Directory domain services. So it requires a DNS server to be installed on the network. If you do not have a DNS server, you will be prompted to install the DNS server role on this machine, which is what we want. Okay, next. Restart the destination server automatically if required. Okay, so Active Directory, Domain Services, Group Policy, Management, Remote Server Administration Tools, Role Administration Tools, ADDS and ADLDS Tools, Active Directory Module for PowerShell, ADDS Tools, ADDC, ADDS Snap-in. Okay, install. Okay, we'll wait a bit. So the disk is really hammered right now, although it's an SSD NVMe. It does NGen. Defragmentation servers. So this is for Windows updates. Defragmentation server service is using 15% of the CPU. Testing. And most of the RAM. Okay, so said feature installation configuration required. I need to press close and then continue with the steps, the configuration required steps. Okay. So the last step is to promote the machine as a ADDC domain controller. Server Manager, there's a yellow exclamation notification besides the Manage button. Click on this yellow triangle and says promote this server to a domain controller. Okay, it asks for if I want to add to an existing domain. There's no existing domain. To add a domain to an existing forest, there's no existing forest, so the only possible option is add a forest. And it says the domain name, which is probably the DNS domain name. Okay, so that's local dom.local. Let's see if copy paste works. We're connected using an RTP client, so copy paste should work of text. Local dom.local. Next. Okay, it has selected correctly to enable domain name system, so DNS server. Forest functional level, domain functional level. There's nothing newer than 2016, so let's leave it at 2016. And now we need a password for the DSRM directory services restore mode password. Okay. Now there's nothing more to select. Next. It says yellow bar. A delegation for this DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found, which we need to ignore. Next. Okay. A NetBIOS name for the domain, which should be the same as the first part of the DNS name. So local dom uppercase is correct. No longer than 15 characters. So make sure that the first word in your DNS name is not longer than 15 characters. This way there will be an easy match between the DNS name and the NetBIOS name. So you just take the first word and stop at the first dot in the DNS name and make that uppercase. Okay, so we just keep these defaults. A final review. So local DOM correct. So Windows Server 2016 correct, local dom.local correct, new forest, DNS server, directories, use this DNS server as its preferred DNS server, yes. DNS server will be configured on this computer, yes. The password, there will be a new domain user named administrator that will have the same password as the Windows user administrator, so the local Windows user. And the domain user will be both named administrator and will have the same password. Okay, next. Verifying prerequisites. Okay, all prerequisites checks passed successfully. Okay, next. Installation starting, waiting for DNS installation to finish. and if needed, it will reboot automatically. Okay, so this is the automatic reboot. Reboot faster, okay. And now we should not connect using the local user administrator, but using the domain, Active Directory domain user with the name administrator. So how do I do that using X3RDP? I don't know. So domain /user. Okay, let's do that. Domain is can be local DOM, so NetBIOS name of the Active Directory domain. Local DOM /administrator. Yes. So this is a new connection. Yes. Same password for the two users that are named administrator. So I used the other syntax, so not /u colon domain /administrator, but /u colon administrator at and then the DNS name of the Active Directory domain. At /u says we could have domain /user or user at domain. Okay, so like this it worked. Okay. What else do we need to do? So it's almost done. What's not yet done? The time zone. Let's see the time zone. Some of these settings are hidden and managed by your organization. Okay, and then we need to set a DNS server inside of the DNS server. So this Windows Server 2022 is named DC1 and is a DNS server and needs to use another DNS server to solve all of the computers that are not part of the Active Directory domain. Oh, it does. It works somehow. I'm not sure how. Next up, we'll set the time zone. So for that, in Server Manager, we go local server and time zone. Eastern Time, US and Canada. Okay. And we could join other Windows computers to this Active Directory domain already. Let's see how that looks like. So Virt Manager, we have another Windows machine, this one. Let's start it. Where are you? Open. So this is a Windows user. What's this? Microsoft Edge, Microsoft Bing. Cancel. Sign in to enjoy. Skip. Okay. So my user is admin, a local Windows user. The Windows computer is Windows 10. And we can join it to the domain. Thing. So it's named Win10KD. It's a member of a SMB Samba Windows workgroup, so we need to change that to an Active Directory domain. The name is localdom.local, but before that we'll need to set the DNS server. Where is the networking? Properties, no IPv6, okay. Properties IPv4. It's on DHCP and automatic DNS. So I'll put the DNS server, the computer with this IP 200, which is the domain controller. Okay. So DNS server correct, DHCP, gateway, IP address v4 via DHCP. Looks okay. Let me restart the machine and make sure these things remain. These settings that I just did. Okay. So the settings were kept, the DHCP for everything, and hard-coded DNS server, which is going to be the Active Directory domain controller. Now it's the time to join. So visit system, rename this PC advanced, change domain. Let's see if we can ping these things. Local DOM. Nope. At least this one works. Okay, so by pinging the Active Directory domain DNS name, it actually pings the Active Directory domain controller, so the DC1 machine. So So local dom.local. Okay, it asks me for a Active Directory domain administrator. So that's local dom. Let's go like this. And it says, welcome to the local dom.local domain. After restarting, the computer will be joined to the domain. So we have DC1, which is the domain controller, and Win10KD, which is a Windows 10 machine that has been joined to the Microsoft Active Directory. Okay. And now when I try to log in, I could use an Active Directory domain user to connect, such as okay, it accepted my user and password. It saw that it's a member, or it's named administrator from the domain that this computer is joined to, is member of the Active Directory domain user group domain admins. So it is also member of the local user group administrators. Let's look at that. So locally there's a user administrator and a user admin, and locally there's the user group named administrators. Okay. Local dom /administrator. The user domain is the NetBIOS name of the domain that this computer is joined to, which is local dom all uppercase. And user DNS domain is the DNS name of the domain that this user is member of. So local dom.local. Okay, let's exit this user account. You should not use the domain user administrator for day-to-day management. You should probably create other domain user accounts and make them member of the domain admins, and give each of these user to an actual user in your organization, such that you know which of the domain administrators, actual human users, have done what. Because the members of the Active Directory domain user group domain admins have extremely large amounts of power over the entire network, over many computers in your organization. Okay, how can we log out this thing? Sign out. Okay. Now, since the computer Win10KD has joined the domain of the Active Directory domain controller DC1, will be able to see this computer. How do we do that? Active Directory users and computers. There's a computers container, default container for upgraded computer accounts. In here will be all of the computers that will join your domain, in this case Win10KD. And then there's another container. So this is the domain. And this container is domain controller properties. I don't know what this thing is. And it contains DC1, which is the machine, which is the domain controller. Okay. From here on, all of the other things, except maybe making DNS resolve correctly, can be optional settings. So let's see if we can resolve, connect correctly using the DNS client on the Windows 10 machine. So back to here, we could connect using a domain admin or a domain user account or a local user account. Let's go with the local one. What's this thing? So Win10KD /admin. Okay, so this is a local Windows user, not a Active Directory domain user. Let's see. So google.com. Okay, could solve this thing. So DNS settings seem to work okay. Using the DNS server .200, which is the machine DC1. Okay. Sign out. And for the rest of the optional settings, there's a YouTube video that I followed, which is this one. Which is Windows Server 2019 Active Directory Domain Controller install for the beginner sysadmin tutorials, 55,000 views, and the video is 42 minutes long. Okay. What does the video do? From start. It goes, so it creates a Windows Server, installs a Windows Server machine, sets static IPv4 address, sets 127.0.0.1 as the DNS server to use, sets a name for the computer, enables remote RDP server, edits the firewall, disables Internet Explorer enhanced security configuration, puts the correct name to the server machine. It names the server machine server DC1, not DC1 as we did. Then it The video follows the wizard in Server Manager for adding roles and features for Active Directory domain services, everything that we did. This also installs a DNS server, promotes the server as a domain controller. Okay. Then restarts the machine, logs in as the domain administrator user into the domain controller server machine. Okay. Then it goes to the DNS settings. Where are the DNS settings? DNS. So it says that in forward lookup zones, there's 2 zones created automatically, and one which is named as our domain, which is ms, which is localdom.local in my case. There's a record for DC, for the DC server, for domain control, which is hard-coded to the static IPv4 address that ends in 200. And there's no reverse solving. So if you go on the Windows 10 machine that's joined to this domain, if you go ping DC1, it will say that the IP address, IPv4 address of DC1 is this with .200. Whereas if you're going to ping 192.168.122.200, it will not know that the name of that machine is DC1. Okay, so for that, it goes to reverse lookup zones. And goes add a new zone. In options to select here, so next. We keep all of these defaults. Next. We keep these defaults. Next. IPv4 not v6. Next. And we need to put the subnet, so 192, 168, 122. One hundred 168, 122. We go next. Okay, we keep these defaults. Next and finish. So now using a command prompt, we can go ping DC1. Ugly, it did IPv6 ping. Okay, so it goes from the hostname DC1 to the hostname dc1.localdom.local, which is the DNS name. And it went then to the IPv4 address, which ends in 200. Ping has this parameter -a to resolve addresses to hostname, so to go from IPv4 address to hostname. So we use that -a, and we go 192.168.122.200. And now it could convert the IPv4 address to the DNS name of the domain controller, so dc1.local.dom.local, thanks to the reverse lookup zone. Okay. Next thing, it tells us how the Windows 10 machine that's joined to the domain could navigate to web.de and to google.com, because in the DNS DC1 properties, there's a list of forwarders. So we could put, for instance, 8.8.8.8, which is the one of the DNS servers from Google in here. So all of the IPv4 addresses that the DNS server cannot figure out and convert from hostname to IPv4, all of those will fall back to 8.8.8.8. Okay, but why it can do some resolves is because of the root hints. Okay, so we're not going to edit the root hints, and as long as it works, we cannot put the one known DNS server in here in forwarders. Okay, then it goes to the advanced tab and says enable automatic scavenging of stale records. The default is 7 days, so we like that default. Go apply. Next, they go to the monitoring tab and says test a simple query and recursive query, and test now. It should say pass for the simple query and pass for the recursive query. Then apply, then OK. Then properties on local dom.local, and the continuation of the 7-day aging policy. Scavenge stale resource records, keep all of the defaults, and go OK. And OK. So that's it for the DNS settings. Next up, Active Directory sites and services. So expand sites, go to subnets, there's nothing there, go new subnet, go prefix, and use the subnet of the domain controller, so 192.168.122.0/24. So in CIDR notation, say IDR 192.168.122.0/24. The name, default first site name, Okay, so now there's a subnet and a default first site name with one server, which is DC1. So any of the users and computers from the subnet 192.168.122.0/24. So in this case, the Windows 10 computer, for instance, when they connect to the Active Directory forest, they will prefer the domain controller DC1. So this is for multi-domain controller sites. But we just have one domain controller and one subnet. Okay. So for instance, if you have two sites in two different countries and want one of the sites to prefer one domain controller and the other site to prefer another domain controller, because you have two domain controllers in one for each country, then this is the place to do it. And you would probably name default first site name to the name of that country and create another one, another subnet in another default. Okay. This is it with the Active Directory sites and services. Next, it's Active Directory users and computers. So in computers, there's all of the joint computers excepting the domain controllers. In domain controllers, there's the only domain controller that we have, which is DC1. Then in users, we have the domain users and domain user groups. The most important user there is administrator, and the most important group is domain admins. Okay. In here you would add a new user. Or you could go new organizational unit. For instance, we'll create an organizational unit for all of the human users that will be Active Directory domain admins. Windows admins. We most of the time leave protect container from accidental deletion turned on. Okay, so this is a OU, organizational unit. And we go new and user. There's this wizard. Let's call this administrator John Black. Go for the full name. So first name and last name. First John Black. User logon name John Black. So it creates the two types of username. The one with email style name, so with @localdom.local, so the DNS name of the domain, and the previous format, which is called pre-Windows 2000 user local name, which is the NetBIOS domain name / the short username. Next, we give it password. Okay. We force the user to change the password when the user logs in or not. And then the user is created. Finish. Okay, so we have a user. It's of type user, not a user group. And by default, all users are members of the Active Directory domain user group named domain users. This is the default user group, domain users. In order for this user to be a domain administrator, we need to place it in the domain admins group. Okay. A next step would be to remove the user from the Active Directory domain user group domain users, because this user receives some rights and privileges and some powers from the domain users, but all of those rights and privileges and powers are also part of the domain admin user group. So domain admins is in fact a superset of domain users. So we could leave them as they are, but since one contains the other, we can leave just domain admins as the user group in which John Black is member. So we select domain admins and we make it set primary group. And then we delete the domain users group. So by moving the user John Black from the Active Directory domain user group domain users to domain admins, the user does not lose anything. The user gains a ton of power. Okay, that's it for Active Directory users and computers. And then the rest of the YouTube tutorial tries to perform the same steps that all the configurations that the user has done manually using his mouse and keyboard, to do it in an automated fashion using PowerShell scripts. And that's it. So we have installed Windows Server 2022. We have converted that computer to an Active Directory domain controller. We also installed a DNS server, and we've configured this machine. And then using another Windows 10 computer, we've joined that Windows 10 computer to the Active Directory, to the newly created Active Directory domain. And that's it for this tutorial on how to install Windows Server Active Directory domain. Thank you.